Hello, thank you for joining me. Welcome to the OT meeting room. Today I want to talk about the value of occupational therapy, a conversation I'm continuing. And specifically, I want to speak to activity analysis. Activity analysis is something that occupational therapy practitioners bring to our practices, as you know, and I believe it's one of our superpowers. As I have grown in my practice, activity analysis is one of those things that has just evolved and grown. You probably know what I'm talking about. The longer you practice, the more you apply the knowledge that you learned in OT school, and the more you integrate it and see how it works in practice, the easier it becomes, the more your understandings grow and evolve. And so, with that being said, I want to talk about some struggles that I see students have, and I'm going to bring in 3 documents today, my discussion with you. So the first is a book that we use at the college I teach at in our occupational therapy assistant program. We use the occupation-based activity analysis 2nd edition book by Heather Thomas, and it's published by Slack. I love this book. This book coincides with the OT practice framework, and it breaks down activity analysis according to terminology in the OT practice framework. And I have my very well used OTPF here with me today. I use it so much, it's actually fallen apart. And I've labeled all of the different sections because I use this for grading papers, I use it for teaching, and yeah, it just helps me. I like office supplies, and I love to use them in various ways, and so I've just labeled each section here. And so I'm going to refer to the OT practice framework. And the other document that I have here is a portion of the uniform terminology, which is the document that I say I grew up with, because that was the official document that we used when I was going to OTA school. And I loved uniform terminology. I still love it so much that I have taken portions of it, and I provide this with my students, and I'm going to tell you why. But first, I want you to know that when I was going to OT school is when the OT practice framework came out, and so I had to transition from using the uniform terminology to the OTPF, and it was a bit of a struggle for me. And one thing that really helped me understand it better, well, there are 2 things that helped me understand it better, but when I was an OT student on my level 2 field work, my fieldwork educator asked me to give a presentation to the OT staff on the OTPF. So that forced me to really get to know it better, because when you're teaching something, you want to understand what it is you're teaching, and teaching is a great way to help yourself understand something better. So if, as an OT practitioner, you are feeling like you would like to challenge yourself more, or you would like to be challenged more to grow, then picking a topic that is of interest to your colleagues, or picking a topic that you notice, like if you notice something going on in the clinic where you feel like you guys could do it better, or you could provide better services, anything that you're interested in wanting to know more of, perhaps volunteer to do an in-service on that topic. Or even an excellent thing right now, because it's still April and it's OT month, an excellent opportunity is to teach OT concepts to the other disciplines in the facility that you work at, or even to the clients and their family members. So that's a little sidebar. I love teaching. And so I first want to begin by saying that one of the struggles that I've noticed students have is with the OT practice framework. So if I go to the client factors section of the OTPF and I look at certain categories, so mental functions, for example, we know that that includes affective, cognitive, and perceptual. And we know that these concepts are taught in our programs. We know that students learn about the body and the mind through the different courses that they take in OT school or OTA school. But sometimes students forget what they've learned. You know, they're learning an awful lot in a short period of time, and it's easy to compartmentalize each of those topics and those subjects that we learn. And so sometimes students need reminders. I need reminders. I'm sure students need reminders too. So the thing that I noticed with the OTPF is, I'm going to pick a topic here, but not cognition. So I want to pick the sensory functions category. And we have visual functions. And we have a list of various visual functions in that category. So quality of vision, visual acuity, visual stability, and visual field functions to promote visual awareness of environment at various distances for functioning. Sorry, when I get excited, I start talking faster than my mouth really can move. The same thing with vestibular functions. Sensation related to position, balance, and secure movement against gravity. Now this is one that I want to highlight because I find when I have students do treatment plans and I'm pulling in terminology, I want them to pull in terminology. I give them case studies, and I find that in terms of balance, some of our students get confused on like using vestibular responses as a problem for balance compared to a muscle strength deficit or an abnormal muscle tone thing going on in a person's body that can cause a loss in balance. Now, I talk to them about that. I teach them about those things throughout the coursework, and I know that this information has been addressed in other courses that they take throughout the program. And there's still a disconnect. And so what I've done is I have pulled in these other documents into my teaching, and I try to bring a little bit more awareness to this, to certain terms. And my goal is, I always tell the students where I get this information from, and my goal is to empower them to use resources to help themselves understand things better, so that when they become practitioners, when they are working in clinics, they feel empowered to do this. And which is why I'm having this conversation with you today, because as a clinician, like once we're out of school, there's not always somebody there to guide us and say, hey, it looks like you could understand this better. Why don't we talk about this? Sometimes we have to do that for ourselves, but we don't always know how to do that. So what I've done is pulled in the occupation-based activity analysis book, because this book in chapter, hang on, let me see what this chapter is. It's chapter 6, and it talks about, in the activity analysis, determining the required body functions. Well, within this chapter, she has broken down each of these body functions, and she provides detailed explanations of what they are, and it's so much easier for understanding, like based on diagnosis, based on deficit, based on symptoms and things that are going on within the person, and the aspects of their actions, their mobility, their movements, their thought processes that we see that are going on with them. And it just helps us to become better at understanding how to help them. And so I just want to show you here in the sensory functions section where she has broken down vestibular functions. She talks about it in terms of position, in terms of balance, in terms of secure movement against gravity. And I'm telling all of you this so that if you're looking for a little bit more, if you would like to understand these concepts more, perhaps you have this book from being in OT or OTA school, or perhaps you would like to order this book and use it as a resource for yourself, because it adds a new level of depth and understanding to what you already know. And that is one of the fun things about learning when you already have a foundational knowledge, which is why I think it's so exciting to be an OT practitioner. Because every time we go to work, we're never presented with the same exact thing from client to client, patient to patient. And we're always called upon to draw from information that we have. And so if we can build on that information and really develop our skills as a clinician, then we provide more meaningful interventions and more appropriate interventions and effective interventions for our clients and patients. And so before I move on to all the joys of activity analysis, I want to talk about the uniform terminology handout, which I copied just the terminology in terms of like the performance components when they used to be called that, and all of those different performance components, because it's a quick reference tool that I can have anywhere. I can stick it in a binder, I can put it in my clipboard, I can refer back to it, and in that way it helps me in my rationale and justification. It's so that I don't have to always have everything in my head. And sometimes, like, having an understanding of something and then being able to explain it to another person can be challenging. And so having these quick references for ourselves, like you can even make your own for yourself with terms that you use often, and keep those with you so that when you're doing your documentation, you can refer back to those terms and write better notes, improve your documentation, and improve that skill while you're at it. Because all of this, it all works together. You know that. Okay, so self-empowerment is important, and having some strategies that you can use to help yourself, it's important, because there's not always somebody there to tell you what to do. Okay, so just back to activity analysis in general. So I love this book because it talks about the difference between a general activity analysis and then an occupation-based activity analysis. And once you start having clients, and when we do occupational therapy for a length of time, we have a general understanding of what's required for a healthy person to typically perform an activity. So making a sandwich, completing a tub transfer, getting into and out of bed, getting dressed. But as you know, if you've been working for any length of time, you know that as many people as there are as many ways of doing these things that people can do. And so taking this understanding of activity analysis and working with our patient and learning how they perform a certain task. And then, so learning how they perform it and analyzing the activity based on their performance or based on their preferences. And then watching them perform skills if they have newly acquired deficits. It's a lot of moving parts, and we're taking these moving parts and we're putting them together. And as a newer clinician, it can be mentally exhausting. So if you go home from work tired at the end of the day, if you're a new clinician, if you've changed practice settings after working in a certain setting for a number of years, don't be surprised if you're tired, because it's just you're thinking in a different way again. And it will get easier as the years go on, the more you're immersed in your setting. And so with these moving parts, we've got a general understanding of the steps for an activity. We've got now a new understanding of how our patient or our client prefers to perform an activity, how they used to perform the activity before an insult or an injury occurred. And now we're looking at how they are actually moving, and we're taking those pieces of the puzzle and adding to that the setting that they're currently in, knowledge about where their discharge setting is going to be, who is going to be with them, if anyone is going to be with them. So we're taking all of these pieces and parts of the puzzle and working with all of this knowledge and using our activity analysis skills to create an appropriate intervention plan. So we use activity analysis for intervention, because if we have an understanding of a person's deficits and we have an understanding of what needs to be done and what is required of an activity, this is where we can actually select a great activity that will help promote an improvement in certain deficit areas. So that's one way activity analysis can be used, that we use it in our practices. And then the other piece to that is now they're ready to go to their next setting. So if they're going home, if they're going to a temporary setting, using all of that knowledge to make sure that that discharge plan is a safe discharge plan for them, making sure they're able to engage in the activities, the occupations, basic and instrumental ADLs, making sure that's all covered. So at some point we start thinking, are there compensatory strategies that need to be integrated? Again, you can't take activity analysis out of this. Like, activity analysis is the thing that we do. And are there external supports that need to be in place? Are those external supports in terms, are they going to be required in terms of adaptive equipment, durable medical equipment, a person? Like, how much physical help do they need? So I really think I just have to bring this all home and tell you that activity analysis is one of our major superpowers. And it's probably so much in you that you don't even think about it or realize it or even know it as much as I know it, and I want you to know it too, as much as you really do know it. I'll tell you a story, and this is how it kind of really became apparent to me how great this activity analysis thing is once you understand it and once it becomes your very good friend. Because if you're an OT or an OTA student and you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh my God, if I have to do one more activity analysis, you'll pull your hair out. Well, it's one of the greatest things to have in life. So I was part of a mastermind group a couple years ago, And if you don't know what a mastermind group is, I'm going to tell you, love them. So it's where a group of people get together. And a lot of times it's for business owners, but it can also be for somebody who just wants to improve their life. And you get together with a set number of people. And in our group, we followed a specific format, and we all would take turns sharing a certain problem that we wanted solved. Like, I want to be able to do this thing and I don't understand how to get there. Then you have people preferably who don't do what you do, because you get a lot more variety and perspective and unique ideas for yourself if you have people who don't do what you do. Plus, it helps you to become more articulate in explaining what it is that you want to accomplish, because you have to help people understand your desired outcome. And so a lot of time when we were planning things, if we would be together and we'd be planning things, and the other members of the group would be talking about something that they wanted to do and they weren't sure how to get there, like I could just easily see it. Like it was just something that I could see, like, oh, if you do this, this, and this, then that could help you get here. And finally, one of the guys just said, how do you know? Like, how do you think about all of those different steps? And that's when I just stopped and said to myself, like in my head, I thought, well, how can you not know? But this is the result of my OT education. This is the result of my occupational therapy career, is just understanding the steps and being able to watch and observe and see. And so I'm 100% certain that you have that superpower, because it's what you're doing as an OT practitioner. And so if you are ever questioned about certain things and you feel the need to defend occupational therapy, keep in mind that activity analysis is one of our it is probably our biggest superpower, but it is one of our superpowers. It is part of the value of occupational therapy. So I'm going to end there. I hope you enjoyed this chat. I hope you found benefit in activity analysis discussion. I hope you start thinking more about activity analysis and how it's actually used in your setting, and how you use it every day in your life, and the benefits that you are actually bringing to your patients, your clinical sites, and the people that you work with every day because of your activity analysis knowledge. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.